All I can do is laugh at that set because we're supposed to be doing doubles here. Dave just hits 4 with a huge amount of rest pause in between. That's stuff that's definitely off of programming. It's cool stuff for me to see, but in terms of like... Dave is one of these guys that is currently fucked up, and we are gonna try to rebuild Dave Tate. You know, over the years, trashing the body, doing world-class things under the bar, it takes its toll. Dave's dealing with some big orthopedic issues, and after going through some of his medical history, some of his training history, and his current training status, we have some work to do. That's why I'm here at the Elite FTS headquarters, and we're gonna be spending an entire day assessing, evaluating, and getting a game plan to move Dave Tate forward. All right, guys, so we broke down Dave's dynamic efforts, his max efforts for the lower body. So we're actually gonna put the new programming for phase 3 into play right here in real time. I'm gonna be bringing Dave through his brand new training session. We're gonna be doing dynamic effort lower body day. But before we get into that, I wanna see what Dave's been doing with his 6-phase dynamic warm-up sequence that supposedly he's been doing every single day for the last 10 weeks. So what I'm gonna do is do some observing, watch the process unfold. This should take about 12 to 15 minutes to get through. I'm just gonna fine tune some of the movements that we're doing, but this is something that is a compounding effect over time, so it's not a whole lot of stuff that we altered in terms of his programming. Dave's made some modifications over the couple of weeks. He's gonna show me those, and then we're gonna move forward. We're gonna get to some dynamic effort squats and also pulls with the trap bar. So what we got Dave doing here is a 3-way T-spine foam rolling drill. He's gonna go into flexion, he's gonna go into extension, a little bit of soft tissue work, but also mobilizing into that extension moment off the T-spine here. Utilizing a deep diaphragmatic breath, you guys can hear it. Dave's not mic'd up, I am, but he's breathing out through the mouth, making sure that it's full volitional control over the inhalation, exhalations. Also getting a little bit of lat work in there if they're tight. Just a little bit of something on the back side of the body to open up that T-spine, because that was one of our big indicator movements. This one's fine. It says Dave gets into this position, he gets his scaps out of the way, you can get more of the rhomboids, you can get some of those acute muscles of the scapular area there. It's a more muscular feel. As soon as he rolls over here, you're getting more upper back, you're getting more lat involvement, and again, using a little bit of elevation of the arm just to put the lats on some stretch here. This looks totally fine. You notice that slow controlled movement. We're not doing pizza dough rollers. We're using the roller 1 to 2 inches of relative motion over the ground. This stuff looks really, really good. The biggest thing with this is you don't want to be straining, you don't want to be stressing when you're doing your foam rolling drills. You want to be actually relaxing into the foam roller. You want to be breathing. You want to have it parasympathetic in nature. So keep that in mind, because we want to dull the sympathetic response right now and kind of get out of pain, be moving a little bit more functionally. Dave's cheat sheet. So talking about the T-spine is a place where you're also going to do a lot of daily maintenance work on. That wasn't necessarily programmed in the T-spine for Dave, but just because he's been driving probably about an hour today, we've been sitting in meetings today, that's the day-to-day norm for him. There's never too much upper back work we can do. So mobilizing the T-spine, working the upper back in terms of hypertrophy, metabolic stress, band pull apars, band face pulls, you can't overdo that stuff. This is more getting into the program stuff. We have Dave hitting the vastus lateralis here, the biggest quadriceps muscle, but also right down the midline of the thigh with the rectus femoris as well. Both of those are hip flexor muscles. They're also quadricep muscles that play a role in extending and flexing the knee. These look good too here. Again, Dave's hitting one of those light switch moments, I should say, that's at that posterolateral, anterolateral hip girdle here. This is a really nice area just to work on some of those tissues, because you have a lot of underlying tissues that really come into connection with each other there. So really a high yielding factor. Within about 30 seconds, you can get a lot of good work in on the lateral side of the hip there. Just like first impressions here, just kind of talking out loud, just the way that Dave's able to kind of move in and out of these positions, it's actually like night and day difference from what we did in terms of his functional movement screen, but also teaching the 6-phase warm-ups for the first time about 10 weeks ago. So just the little stuff. It's not always about metrics in the lifts. It's not always about the fancy stuffs on the corrective exercise, but just the easy things about the way that somebody's moving, the way that they're stabilizing, even in ground-based contact. So the oscillatory technique, the foam rolling technique, is the one that we usually use, just a little bit of micro movements going back and forth, 1 to 2 inches of relative motion on the foam roller. As you can see Dave in here, he's coming into a static hold over the foam roller. This is more of an acute trigger point technique. So he's placing pressure down through the tissues, he's placing a huge amount of pressure there, and then he's mobilizing on top of the tissues with relative movement happening from the hips. So this is again a nice variation that you can use in the warm-up sequence. We're trying to get in and out of here for Dave within 2 to 4 minutes here, but just putting first things first, working on those linchpins instead of just going all over the body here. Sometimes those baroreceptors, the pressure receptors in the muscles themselves, it takes a couple seconds just to kind of fool them into turning off. And as soon as we can stimulate those, then we can get a better feel. That's where that spontaneous electrical activity in the tissues, those trigger points, those are the best technique to take care of those trigger point techniques. So we just mobilized the front side of the body, the hip flexors. Now we're actually getting in and trying to stretch upon that new range of motion that we just opened up on the foam roller. So Dave's in the standardized position, half kneeling position, 90-90. Really the big emphasis here is dominating pillar position, core position, being able to authentically move into right hip extension range of motion, slight extension. We're not forcing this thing, we're not compensating. A little bit goes a long way here. In a matter of about 30 seconds, we switch it off. We just want to get into the position where we start to cue the pillar. So you can see the slight back and forth. This is an oscillatory technique again. The body thrives with micro movements, so we're not just sitting here static stretching. We're in a posturally dependent position with half kneeling, and Dave has full tension through his entire body as he's oscillating in and out of hip extension on this opposite side here. So it's the little stuff with these movements that really makes the biggest difference. You can bullshit it, or you can go through it with a rhyme and a reason and actually get through and execute it properly. That's really the biggest thing on getting benefits from it, as opposed to just wasting 15 minutes of your time pre-training. So it's the Dr. Stuart McGill staple, the bird dog exercise. Quadruped arm leg opposites is another name for them. Really what we're looking at is reciprocal function of the upper extremity, lower extremity, both coming into extension moments. The intermediary position here is going to be the core, and that's really what we're trying to work on. Dr. McGill's done a lot of great research showing the way that the core integrates with the things like the deep iliopsoas group, the QL group, and the gluteal complex, just to kind of combine as a functioning unit again, and that's the reason why we're using it here. This is a modification that Dave has made on his own here, because we have those limitations in terms of bony anatomy on that right shoulder, so we don't want to be cranking into an elevation-based moment over and over again on this right side. So Dave's just bringing it back down, still reciprocally, but into extension as opposed to a flexion moment on that right side. The left side's the same. Really the big emphasis here is placed on this being a strong and stable unit, huge amounts of activation happening from the glute, but also happening from the lats and the shoulder complex coming up as well, all in unison together. The reason that I'm using this in programming for a lower body emphasis day is really for that hip extension moment. So if Dave's not getting this with his right shoulder, it's not a big deal. So Dave's going into a traditional glute bridge here. What we're using is an RNT method with the band around the knees, trying to create some more glute activation from an abduction, externally rotated hip position. So what I'd like to see here is you to get your upper back and your shoulders involved with this one. So I want to come up into a 45-degree position. I want your elbows driving down into the ground, and I want your fists to create a radiation and tension. So I want everything driving down, and I want you to truly be on your upper back so you can move the upper back off the ground just a bit more. Because we just worked hard. We devoted a minute to that T-spine. Let's use it. That's better. Instantly better. So we're not getting more hip extension, we're just getting truer hip extension here. We're allowing the spine to remain in neutral as opposed to flexing over at that lower TL junction. One other modification, stay down, one more set. I want you to bring your feet a little bit closer together. I want you to pre-rotate your legs out, and I want this to be around here. So I want the moment arm to be a little bit shorter because I want you to pull into this band here. So I want you to pre-rotate. If you're out on the outsides of your feet, that's totally fine because that will kick into that external rotation. And then I want you to drive up from there. Again, peaking the squeeze, controlling the eccentric moment back down. Drive down, pre-tension, and then up. Yeah, much better. Good. So I can see more tension there because I can see a little bit of that shake happening at the top flex. That's stuff you don't even have to go and palpate asses for. You can just see the quality of the contraction there just based off of the musculature coming through the pants there, but also you can see that when he's peaking the squeeze, there's actually a little bit of a shaking moment. That's totally fine, that's normal. That's something that we want to achieve with an activation drill. All right, so I honestly didn't know whether you're gonna go in and squat it or you're to hinge it. The first 3 reps, I was like, I didn't know which one it was. That was the squatty hinge, the hingy squat.
The hamstrings
So
are tight. It started cramping down there. It takes me a couple sets to
right.
get.
Okay, so that was a true RDL top-down approach. It'll open up little by little, but this is the place to do it, in the warm-up. We're not trying to open up while we're ramping up.
Supersetted with
Right.
the RDL, but it was a mess. That was a mess.
On your squat, I want you to be a little bit wider. I want you to mirror more of, not your competition style squat, but just a little bit more toe out. And I want you there, and I want a knee dominant action. So I want you to be coming down and have the knees doing the majority of the work, okay? So let's split this off. Let's do 5 quality reps here. Controlled. Good. Good, we're gonna go into more of like a shoulder width apart, toes a little bit more forward, and this is gonna be our true hip hinge leading with those hips coming back, good. You're doing a great job of feeding that kettlebell right through the heels, keeping close to the body, keeping the lats engaged, rocking posterior. Good, better. On this last one, I want you really to hone in on the tempo. So I want you to pull yourself down in the squat. So as you go down, I want full tension there. And with the RDLs, I don't want you back on your heels. I need those 3 points of contact on the ground. I need you to stay grounded. This is the time to grease the groove though. This is the time to work on shit, not under 600 pounds. Slower tempo, more tension. Good. More tension. Right there, one more like that. Good, hinge. Root into the ground. Good. So it looks like Dave's getting less range of motion because he's keeping his pinky toe, he's keeping his big toe on the ground a little bit better, but that's more authentic range of motion. Before we were just kind of falling back and it was all happening with momentum, bringing them back. So those look much better. Just slowing yourself down. If you want to improve form, slow yourself down, give your body more time to react to the altering positions. Very simple. Really high amounts of tension, nice and smooth. Good. Good. Last one that we had programmed, I don't know if you ditched this one, was that mid-range iso hold on single leg.
Oh yeah, no, that's right, that's right.
So we don't have Dave doing a lot of jumping or plyometrics, if at all any. So what we have him doing is isometrics instead. So we're just doing max tension. We're going about halfway between that range of motion, getting into the split stance. That's the one that we really want to focus on. The whole body is tensioning all at once. We're getting 5 to 7 seconds, and then we're switching off. I mean, just getting in and out of that position is like, it's night and day difference functionally. I'm gonna do one thing, just one quick pre-test post-test. I want right foot here, I want left foot here. I want you to come down like this, and I want you to stand up. So get your feet on that line. Good, do a split squat from there. Back up. Good, opposite way. Guys, we don't have to re-FMS somebody every single time. We see something like this, you go, oh shit, that's looking really good. You do a quick retest, takes 7 seconds to do. Oh, guess what? That's gonna be a 2-2 if you look at that, if you try to grade that out, not taking into account the upper extremity position. You just went from a suck, shit, like you would say, at a 0-0 previously 10 weeks ago to being good to go to train that. But that, I knew that was gonna happen, and that's the reason that we're actually gonna be training single leg under loading now, because you're in the right to do it. It is now a functional movement pattern for us to add load and add intensity too. That means good things are about to happen with that.
Yeah, so it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, look how your feet were slipping around a little bit.
yeah. Note to anybody, don't use squat shoes to do this shit.
All right, so what we're gonna go in, we're gonna prime hamstrings, we're gonna get some pump work in before we get into the dynamic squats, dynamic trap bar pulls. What we're gonna be using with Dave this block of training is 2 different hamstring primers. So we're gonna be going through and doing one seated variation, a standing variation, or a lying variation, but we're not gonna be doing the same one 2 times in a week. So we're just gonna be altering the stimulus with the grand goal of trying to prime the hamstrings, trying to get blood flow around the knees, and just lubricate that joint a bit more before we get in and actually add some heavy, more explosive loading to it. So I want to be super nitpicky here, but I want like the tempo, I want the loading to be a point where we can actually hit close to failure in terms of tempo on like rep 15 or so. And then having just that strong volitional contraction, peaking the contraction, then grading back out the eccentric moment, just to, again, expedite blood flow into the area. So a goal with these ones, constant tension. So we want constant tension, we want peak contractions, we want longer eccentric moments, and we just want smooth movements. We want to keep constant tension on those hamstrings. So again, driving as much blood flow into the tissues with minimal load here.
This is still going to be a warm-up set.
Yep. I want to make sure you're not rebounding off the back of that, because as soon as you hit, you lose all your tension, and then using a constant tension-based movement, it kind of defeats the purpose. So peaking the contraction right before you hit, that's what we want to be doing. You ever use your hands with those on the hand grips?
I've tried, yeah, I can try. I usually don't.
I want to see what the hand grips look like, just so we can kind of put some tension through the lats so we can minimize the amount of extension happening at the lumbar spine.
Okay.
I mean, it was just as you got to those last couple reps, we saw the spine going into extension, just losing tension again. As soon as the spine goes into extension, we lose the emphasis on the hamstrings. Again, these are quicker pace. We have Dave at like 45 to 60 second clips for rest periods, because again, it's a cumulative effect of pumping mass amounts of blood into the backside of the body here. So that's what I want right there. So you hit failure sooner, but there's nothing coming from the lower back on that one. That was all hamstrings. I'm sure the activation felt a lot better on those too. You got the MMC up. Again, if we can minimize the amount of reps it takes us to get to the goal, which is to prime, that's good. And anytime we have something moving that we don't want moving, that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing on squats, it's not a good thing on deadlift, it's not a good thing on machine training. We just want to lock everything back in. All right, so we got Dave through his 6-phase dynamic warm-up sequence. We primed the posterior chain with some hamstring curls. We got to failure on those. Now it's time to actually go through the dynamic effort work. So we have Dave working off the box. We're gonna be incorporating accommodating based resistances. We're looking for maximal movement velocity here, throwing load on top of it, trying to really maximize the force equation here. So I'm gonna be watching Dave go through this. We're gonna be fine tuning some of his stuff. And the good thing about dynamic effort work is we're gonna be doing 10 working sets today. So it's a lot of little tweaking that we can do, knowing very well that the speed is what we're after here, the feel is what we're after. It's not necessarily max effort loading. From there, we're gonna go into some trap bar pulls. We're gonna finish with some RDLs, and then we'll really get this secondary lower body training day kept for the day here. So we got Dave all ramped up here. We got loading dialed in. He's going with band only tension with accommodating based resistance. We got 8 sets of 2 at about 45-second clips, and we're really working on speed endurance here. So we want him to keep up the speed over all 8 sets and really just get it to the point where that fatigue does not hit early on. You know, we want endurance with the amount of speed that we're able to put against the bar. But again, we'll see Dave perform a little bit more here in these next couple sets. We'll have about a 10-minute block here where he's working consistently. So that was set 1, working set done. We're going 7 more sets, 45-second rest periods here. We're hitting doubles all the way up. Load's gonna stay the same, band's gonna stay the same. We're gonna get all the work in at this top. All I can do is laugh at that set because we're supposed to be doing doubles here. Dave just hits 4 with a huge amount of rest pause in between. That's stuff that's definitely off of programming. It's cool stuff for me to see, but in terms of like risk to reward, man, I usually can't get behind a lot of that, but again, we saw some cool stuff with it. So Dave ditched the belt here, which was interesting. Between set 6 and set 7, takes off the belt. Breathing is going, harder to recover. Again, that's gonna be our main focus, is bringing up the cardiorespiratory endurance, trying to work into those energy systems again, because this is where we start to see that base of endurance not being there to the point where it's affecting power and dynamic work. So we need to be getting that base level back so we can actually get into these sets and train a little bit harder there. You know, that was Dave's last set of 8 there. He got 4 in, that's totally fine. But, you know, it was hard to get it to that last point. But that's, again, the idea of speed endurance work. I like what I saw there. Honestly, I told Dave off camera here that I couldn't be happier with that squat pattern. It's as low as he's squatted in close to 10 years. He has dynamic hip control. Core is on point. He's sitting on the box, nice under tension. Everything's looking really good, and he performed really well under the bar there. I know it wasn't a whole lot of load, it wasn't a whole lot of band tension, but from a movement quality standpoint, night and day difference from what I saw 10 weeks ago. So I'm blown away at Dave's dynamic effort squats. Let's see what he has with dynamic effort trap bar. against the bands. We've been using the trap bar over the last 10 weeks or so with a huge amount of success. Dave's been able to push heavy weights. He's been able to push endurance on it. He's been able to do a lot without really any big repercussions. So this is the first time that I'm able to see Dave in his new deadlift platform here. So we're gonna dial up the band tension. We're gonna go after doubles here with controlled eccentric, which is something that we haven't been doing. We've been doing concentric only training with this pulls off the ground thus far. We're implementing this in for phase 3, and it's gonna be something to see the way he responds to this. Again, going after 6 sets, doubles, and we're also using that 45-second rest period again for the repeatability of having more stress going through the system, more total volume through the system.
What, you talking shit?
It was in the eyes, you can see it.
Old habits die hard. That was the best rep of the day. So we had Dave doing his dynamic effort trap bar off the high handles with heavy band tension. And what I wanted to see today was if Dave was ready to have that eccentric lowering moment in this movement. So we got through a couple. It was really hard for Dave to dial in that eccentric lowering under control, and it honestly didn't feel too good. But that's something that, again, real-time problem solving, we're not gonna continue to force feed that if it feels like shit. What we're gonna do is use more of a tempo-based RDL here instead, really lengthening out the hamstrings under heavy contractions happening at the upper body with 2 dumbbells in each hand, and we're gonna go through and actually try to link up 2 of Dave's weak links, which are eccentric strength at the lats and eccentric strength at the hamstrings. So we're gonna actually alter the program that I had planned for Dave. We're gonna be pulling singles or pulling doubles for the next 4 to 6 weeks on the trap bar with band tension, but we're gonna be doing it with a concentric only training scheme. But we are gonna place more of an emphasis here on his RDL with dumbbells, really to get that eccentric lengthening moment, because again, it's all about busting weak links, and this is the intermediary step to actually getting back to the barbell, training it meaningfully, off blocks, with heavy loading, in a couple phases to come here with this training.
All right, you ready for this shit? Y'all ready?
Put those down for a sec, because I want to just show a couple things here. So you're truly doing like a stiff leg. So you're right here, and your knees actually move backwards as you go. A true, authentic hip hinge from the top down, you go from a straight knee angle to anywhere from 30 to 45 degrees of knee flexion. Once that is achieved, it's usually a vertical tib or about 5 to 10 degrees of knee forward. So once that's achieved, then it turns into all hinging. The knees never move. They stay stationary the entire time. So that's something that if you see the knees moving forward, that means that you're squatting your hinge. If you see the knees moving backwards, you know that you're not actually posteriorly chain driven. It's more of just all at the back, because there's no chance you can hinge here because the hips can't translate posterior. So you really need that tiny bit of a bend. The knees stay stationary. So much better. Pull yourself down slowly. Lost it on that one.
How do you want me to come up? Neutral or
Good.
with speed?
I want you to come up a little bit more dynamically. I want to tap into those type 2 muscle fibers. So the ideal tempo when you get through is I want you to control down, squeeze up, control down, squeeze up. Just watch those knees though. I want you this time, I want you to face this way so we can see what you're talking about on those knees. If your knees are falling backwards, it means you're sitting on your heels, and it means everything's coming from right here. If you're using your hips, it's a hinge, and you're using the biggest muscle in your body, which is your ass and your hamstrings. We want to be using those things. So very simple. If you look down, you should be looking down. Your head leads the body. But if you see your knees going back this way, we know that's not what we need. So you literally want to have no movement happening from right here. We want the vast majority of the movement happening at the hinge at the hips. Yes, that. Notice how Dave's feet stay on the ground, his toes are into the floor, his knees stay in a position, and all of the tension, all of the trainability of the tissues is right here. It's not at the lower back. That is what we can transfer into strength in terms of loading. So that will be counted as like our first ramp up set here. Let's grab the 40s, let's see where we're at from there, and then let's kind of see where our loading would be for sets of 8, because that's what we have planned. We want to train this movement between reps between 6 and 10. We're going to stick kind of 8 in the intermediary because again, it's a novel position. It's going to be brand new for us. A little bit of loading goes a long way here. So getting super technical, like we teach 2 different hinges. We usually teach the true RDL as the most authentic hip hinge, but that has a tiny bit more of a knee flexion angle. The true stiff leg is not 0 degrees of knee flexion. It's about 10 to 20 degrees. If you go any more than that, again, we shift to glutes as opposed to pure hamstrings. Yeah, but sometimes when we try to isolate the hamstrings only and we take away the glutes, the back comes in and compensates, because we truly need to be training the hamstrings and the glutes together. They have secondary and tertiary roles that overlap with each other. So functionally, that's where the transference comes from. I want you to also grip this as hard as you can. I want the lats tight. So if I go in there, I want them to be tight. Because again, hamstrings plus lats.
Lat cramp.
That's actually a good thing. That means the lats are turning on. A lot of different reasons for cramping, but that's something that at least we're using the muscles that we're after in terms of stabilizing. If we can combine the lats with the glutes and the hamstrings, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's many different variables in play there. Right side?
Yeah.
Those are the best hinges you've done all day, though. Those look good. With the lats, I want you crushing the hands, but just have enough lat tension where you can feel it turn on. We don't need full, like you're about to deadlift a house. I want the emphasis placed more on the lower body. So if the first thing to fatigue is your lats, that's not a good thing for a hip hinge. That's another thing too. This is the 4th movement of the day. Loading's down a little bit. We're using eccentric moments. That's totally fine. You know, we can get what we need out of it. We can get the volume in and then get out. One thing I do want to note here is the hand position. Dave's not all the way anteriorly loaded. He's not hanging this stuff out in front of his body. He's in a 45-degree hand position. So not neutral, not anterior loaded, but halfway in between. So this allows the lats, the pecs, really to stabilize through the shoulder girdle and get into a position that's more over the center of mass and is an intermediary between what we're doing with neutral and what we'd be doing with the barbell out in front of us with the anterior loaded. So this is a nice intermediary step where we can start to implement in some more controlled eccentric moments with this hand position. So what I want you to do on these, I want this to be a quick hitter. So I want this almost to be like a big giant rest pause set. So I want you to hit failure. I want to take 15 seconds, work on your deep breath. I want you to hit failure again, 15 seconds, hit failure and be done with it.
How rep speed?
I want a nice controlled concentric up. I want to squeeze and then a control back down. So I almost want a constant tension, like a pump going back and forth, back and forth.
Because it ain't going to take much to fail.
That's okay. Flex at the top, don't hold the top. Flex the top and then come back down. Feeling those in the butt?
I'm not going to answer that question.
That's a yes. It's what we call sport-specific work.
He's going to be flying back home thinking, ha ha ha, I had that Dave Tate motherfucker laying on the floor doing hip thrust and pass. Ain't nobody else ever done that.
Do one more. You're going to hold the top position as long as you can, and then you're going to come back down. Hold, squeeze, full body tension, drive those elbows down on the ground, hands, feet, hips, squeeze, squeeze, down. Good job. That's it. When we're working metabolic stress, it doesn't matter the sets and reps so much as the tissue response. So right there, I think that took 3 to 4 minutes to get through. Dave did a triple rest pause set. He got 10 reps, he got 7 reps, he got 4 reps. We came in, we isolated it out. We had tension coming through for another 10 seconds. Did you get a pump in the butt there? So we got the pump, and that's what we're looking at, metabolic stress. We also got into a really great position for Dave to be in to end his training session. The way that we sequence some of this stuff is very, very important. Yeah, this is quite the body mark. But the reason that we put Dave on his back to end the training day is that we want all that blood flow from the legs, from the glutes, from the core to center around his lumbar spine, to re-lubricate the lumbar spine, to get it back up into central circulation. You know, this is something that is so simple. Every single time that you can end a training session laying on your back with your legs elevated preferably, that's going to be a great position for you to try to spark the recovery process with. You can breathe from there, you can do glute bridges from there, you can even do any stretches or foam rolling from there. As long as you can get on your back in 3 points of neutral spine contact, that is going to be a highly advantageous position for you to really, again, start the recovery process before you even walk through the doors of the gym to go back home. All right, so we finished up the training session for today, but the training session truly isn't done until we get in, we actually do our recovery work. So we've implemented in like a 5 to 15 minute session for Dave that he's using every single time he gets done with his training session. So the timing on this is directly after the lower body or upper body lifts. And what we're trying to do here is take the sympathetic response from training that we've been riding so high and actually dull that response and go back into parasympathetic mode. So this is really a foundational practice that literally every single type of person, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a general fitness enthusiast, whether you're in pain, everybody should be doing this stuff because, again, it's foundational practices. What we're trying to do is reduce and blunt the sympathetic response, aka we're trying to reduce heart rate, reduce respiratory rate, reduce our fight or flight response globally. And the best way that we could possibly do this is getting the body into a fully supported position, aka maximize surface area contact on the body, while really incorporating a deep diaphragmatic parasympathetic based breath. And that happens usually with 4 seconds on the inhale, a couple seconds hold at the top, and then an exhalation moment of 6 to 8 seconds. So if you guys are counting this thing out, you should be taking 4 to 6 breaths per minute, not per second, per minute. And at that point, we can really get our body into a good position where we can spark the recovery process while we still have sweat on our face and before we walk through the door and bring our asses home. So this is something that we start off most people with in a variation called crocodile breathing. Crocodile breathing is something that Gray Cook came up with 20 years ago, and it is one of the smartest positions that I've ever used to reteach proper breathing mechanics. So Dave and I were talking about like breathing into the belt, having 360-degree expansion for the bracing process. The same thing can be said for repatterning the breath, because essentially we're training a muscle called the diaphragm. If we can train that muscle again through a full range of motion, concentric, eccentric, change of phases, that is going to be something that's going to be highly advantageous to being able to use it under the bar as well. So by having the belly into contact with the floor, we're actually using the floor as an external cue here in order to push into the floor and expand 360 degrees around the torso. So if you can see this, we don't want to be breathing into our chest here. We don't want to have any shoulder elevation, internal rotation, protraction happening. What we want to have is the breath being signaled through the stomach and then finished off slightly through the chest. If you notice here on Dave's back, we have the upper back coming up off the pad here. This is what we want. We can see this very quickly. We can also see expansion coming here laterally. So really what we want to be doing is using the floor to reset the breath, be able to reteach the breath in order to really bring down and blunt that sympathetic response again. The body perceives threat when it's in less contact with the ground. So the most threatening position that we have is up on one foot in single leg stance. That's also the reason why single leg works very, very well in terms of bringing up people's orthopedic health, but also linking different segments. But on the opposite side of things, if we can maximize surface area contact with the body on the ground, AKA every single segment that we have is in contact with the ground, we can reduce that apprehension in the body, we can bring down those vital metrics, and when we pair that with breathing, this is one hell of a dynamic offering to spark the recovery process directly after training. So this is our base position that we start people off with, but my preferred position is getting into a spinal neutral, fully supported position on your back in supine with the legs elevated. So Dave's gonna switch a pad over here. He's gonna lay down on his back. And again, we like this position because all of the blood from Dave's legs is going to be running down and it's gonna be circulating throughout his lower back. What we want here is the hands down on the ground, just relaxed. We want the legs relaxed. We want the calves to be sitting on the bench here. We want no tension throughout the body, eyes closed, and again, 360 degrees of expansion coming through the belly, using that deep diaphragmatic parasympathetic breath tempo. This is my preferred position, again, because we can bring all that blood flow from the dynamic effort lower body day. You know, we do have blood flow coming into the legs. We have lymphedema forming around the joints. By just getting into this position, we can use gravity to do the work for us. We can start using gravity to, again, bring that fluid back down into central circulation. And anytime that we can reduce huge amounts of inflammation locally around joints or around muscular regions, that's going to be something that lines up well for sparking the recovery process as well. So for parameters for this, you really can't overdo parasympathetic breathing. This is something that works extremely well after the training session. It could work as a secondary respiratory day. Say if you're training in the morning, you could use this at night, paired with foam rolling, paired with some stretching or corrective exercise, or even walking as almost like a secondary recovery-based session. Or at bare minimum, you use that kind of sequence on your off days as well. Anywhere from about 5 to 15 minutes here in a nice, quiet, controlled environment. This is #1 thing that can spark the recovery process. It's not a workout drink. It's not a pre-stimulus. It's nothing about massage or anything that costs money. The thing that works the best is free. It's breathing in the right positions. So don't overthink recovery. If you're not doing this and you're doing all that other shit, do this first, and I guarantee that you're gonna be less likely to be going out and getting a weekly massage. Recovery happens self-sufficiently, and this is where it starts. All right, so some afterthoughts about the training session that just transpired in front of us today. Again, I've said this a couple times, but I was blown away at what I saw 10 weeks ago and what I saw today. We've made leaps and bounds strides forward to the point where we're able to put in more and more advanced variations. The big takeaway for me today was the need to really control the eccentric lengthening of the lats and the hamstrings working together. That's going to be our next step. Really, our first step was dynamic hip stability, dynamic shoulder stability, and opening up the T-spine and the T-cage. We did that. We're going to see that again in the training session of the upper body as well. But adding 2 + 2 together to equal 4, that's the next step. So really the biggest movement pattern that we have at our disposal right now is a true top-down hip hinge pattern with a loaded eccentric moment. That's going to be the thing that, again, fast forward a couple months from now, a couple phases forward, that's going to be the thing that pays off the biggest dividends in terms of functional carryover and just having pain-free performance.